On my wedding day, his first love stood at the door, eyes brimming with tears. My husband took one look at her, and abandoned me and our wedding guests to chase after her. From that day on, he was never there when I needed him most. When I was pregnant and burned myself, unable to move, he was taking care of his first love during her postpartum recovery. When I fell and went into early labor, suffering in agony, he was at the hospital, guarding his first love because she was sick. When our young daughter fell ill with a fever that left her permanently disabled, he was busy searching for his first love's runaway daughter. I endured it. Year after year, I swallowed my pain. I endured for most of my life. Until the day my son announced he wanted to marry my husband's first love's daughter. I died of sheer anger. But when I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day my daughter fell sick. You love your first love? Fine. I wish you both eternal happiness. Chapter 1. Gloria. Gloria. Wake up! Don't sleep here. You'll catch a cold. A groggy haze clouded my mind as I slowly opened my eyes. My arms were numb and tingling, crushed under my weight. Dim lights. The endless clanking of machinery. Hardworking laborers moving tirelessly. I remembered the factory had just imported modern production lines from abroad, so why did the machinery in front of me look so outdated? A familiar voice nagged at my ears. Sigh. I don't blame you for dozing off. 3 consecutive night shifts would wear down even an iron body. But Gloria, you and your husband both have stable jobs. You don't need to work this hard just to make ends meet. I looked up. Vanessa, my best friend, stood there. Her hair jet black, her face youthful, as if she had rewound 10 years overnight. My heart pounded wildly. Something was wrong. Suppressing my growing panic, I grabbed Vanessa's arm. Vanessa, what day is it today? Vanessa frowned, puzzled. December 3rd, 1966. Why are you asking? Are you still half asleep? December 3rd, 1966. Today, the day that ruined my life. There was no time to think. I tore off my work uniform as I ran. Vanessa, I have an emergency at home. Please tell the supervisor I'm leaving. He can dock as much pay as he wants. I burst into the house. It was pitch black. The air was cold. My son lay sound asleep on the warm brick bed. Beside him, my daughter tossed and turned, her face flushed red, her breathing uneven. I reached out. Her forehead was burning hot. I looked around. The one person who should have been home taking care of the kids, my husband, Victor, was nowhere to be seen. A bitter rage twisted in my chest. I yanked open the wardrobe, grabbed a thick military coat, and wrapped my daughter in it as tightly as I could, shielding her from the bitter cold. Beside me, my son stirred. He rubbed his sleepy eyes and muttered in annoyance. Mom, you're too loud. You woke me up. I'm leaving now. Get some rest. I extinguished the kerosene lamp, lifted my daughter in my arms, and left, guided only by the glow of the snow. The roads were slippery, and there were no streetlights. I fell multiple times before I finally made it to the hospital. The doctor examined my daughter and then turned to me, his face dark with disapproval. What kind of mother are you? A child's fever is serious. Why didn't you bring her sooner? If she suffers lasting consequences, you'll regret it for life. My breath caught, my voice hoarse. Will my daughter have any permanent damage? The doctor adjusted his glasses. Luckily, you got her here in time. The nurse will administer in 4. Once the fever breaks, she'll be fine. I exhaled in relief. Half of my anxious heart finally settled. The nurse inserted the needle into my daughter's arm. Gradually, the unnatural flush on her face faded, and she fell into a peaceful sleep. As the nurse tidied up, she struck up casual conversation. It's the middle of the night, and you're here alone with your child. Where's the father? My hands froze. The warmth from rubbing them together instantly vanished. Victor? I remembered my past life. Before I left for my night shift, I repeatedly reminded him. Our daughter had been sick for days. I told him to make sure she took her medicine, to keep her warm, and to take her to the hospital at the first sign of trouble. But then, the factory called him for an emergency shift. Without hesitation, he rushed off to work, leaving our daughter burning with fever. By the time I got home, her hearing was gone. I was devastated. I took her to every hospital in the province. But it was too late. Victor was a model worker, a star employee, in an era where collective interests outweighed personal needs. I had no right to blame him for choosing his duty over his family. All I could do was drown in regret. Night after night. If I had known her fever hadn't improved, why did I leave her with such an unreliable father? But this time, fate had given me another chance. This time, I would protect my daughter. I forced a smile and met the nurse's curious gaze. He's busy with work. I was the only one available. Sensing the tension, the nurse didn't press further. The next morning, I went to the hospital cafeteria to buy breakfast. From afar, I saw Victor carrying a lunchbox filled to the brim as he walked away. Wasn't he supposed to be working overtime at the factory? Why was he here at the hospital? Chapter 2. I instinctively followed him, perhaps afraid that breakfast would get cold. Victor jogged up to the 3rd floor. Just as he reached the top, Diana appeared, carrying a bucket of hot water. Victor's eyes lit up. He carefully pulled out the lunchbox, which he had been keeping warm against his chest, and handed it to Diana. You must be starving after staying up all night. I bought breakfast, eat it while it's still hot. Diana glanced around. Family members of patients hurried past, carrying thermoses of hot water or food trays. Some shot them curious glances. She bit her lip and hesitated for a long moment before resolutely refusing the meal in front of her. I don't even know when I'll be able to pay you back for Roma's medical bills. How could I possibly accept your breakfast too? But before she could say anything else, her stomach betrayed her. Victor pretended not to hear and gently pressed the lunchbox into her hands with a smile. We've been classmates for over 10 years. Do you really think I'd rush you to repay a medical bill? Besides, if you don't eat, Roma has to. You know the saying, it takes 100 days to heal from a bone fracture. Roma really suffered this time. Diana's eyes turned red with emotion. If it weren't for you last night, I don't know how long it would have taken me to find Roma. She's getting naughtier by the day. I hope breaking her leg teaches her a lesson. She wore a simple cotton outfit, with only a deep red scarf adding a touch of color. The contrast made her delicate features appear even more refined, giving her the elegance of a scholar. Victor seemed momentarily dazed. A passing stranger sneezed, snapping him out of it. He quickly masked his distraction and comforted her. You shouldn't say that to the child. Roma is still young. She just needs time and guidance. Diana lowered her head, wiping away the moisture at the corner of her eyes. Then, she smiled. Thank you, Victor. It's getting late. You should hurry home. If Gloria comes back from her night shift and doesn't find you there, she might start overthinking again. You helped me. I shouldn't repay your kindness by stirring up trouble in your home. Victor sighed. Gloria didn't get much education, and she always lets her thoughts run wild. All right, I'll head out. I'll stop by again after work this afternoon to check on Roma. Before leaving, Victor casually pulled out a few ration tickets and some loose change and handed them to Diana. Diana reluctantly accepted, saying she would consider it a loan and find a way to pay him back someday. I stepped aside, hiding in the shadows. As Victor brushed past me, there was a smile on his face, and even his posture seemed lighter. He must be happy, pleased that he could help Diana. Victor and Diana had been high school classmates. Diana was beautiful and kind, a girl that many male classmates admired. Victor was one of them. Later, Diana got into university and fell in love with a technician from the Soviet Union. The two became deeply enamored and quickly married. For a while, their marriage was blissful, until the Sino-Soviet relations collapsed. Diana was forced to separate from her husband. Because of her foreign marriage, she faced intense scrutiny, lost her respectable job, and fell into hard times. To make matters worse, Diana discovered she was pregnant. She saw the child as proof of her love with her husband and refused to terminate the pregnancy. With nowhere else to turn, she thought of Victor. The day Diana showed up at our home was the day Victor and I got married. Our small courtyard was packed with family, friends, supervisors, and colleagues. Just as the factory secretary was about to read the wedding vows, Victor suddenly walked through the crowd and headed outside. I called his name and ran after him. Across the street, I saw Diana standing at the corner. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her lips parting as if to speak, yet she remained silent. Then, she pulled up her scarf to cover her face and turned to run. Victor immediately chased after her, leaving me, the bride, alone to entertain the entire wedding party. Some guests scolded Victor for being reckless. Others felt sorry for me, humiliated by my own husband on our wedding day. The matchmaker, who had introduced us, kept apologizing profusely, but Victor and I were already legally married. I had no choice but to force a smile and defend him. Victor abandoned me for Diana once before, so was it really surprising that he later abandoned my daughter for Diana's? The unattainable first love always lingers in the heart, but he shouldn't have lied to me. He shouldn't have hidden behind the excuse of serving the collective good to justify his bias and neglect. He watched me drown in guilt and self-blame for years, yet never said a single word. We walked home in silence. My son, Eric, had already gotten dressed and was gnawing on a hard, dry cornbread bun at the table. Victor pulled out a package of peach pastries from his pocket and mixed a bowl of malted milk. Eric's eyes lit up with excitement. He immediately dropped the bun, eagerly alternating between bites of peach pastry and sips of malted milk, enjoying himself immensely. Victor went into the bedroom. When he came out, there was a hint of panic on his face. "Eric, where's your sister?" The small boy finished his drink, furrowed his brows, and thought for a moment. I think Mom took her." Victor's face paled. "Your mom worked the night shift yesterday. Did she come home in the middle of the night?" Eric looked at his father, confused, but Victor quickly composed himself. His expression softened into a warm, fatherly smile as he gently asked, "Eric, do you like the peach pastries and malted milk?" Eric nodded enthusiastically. "Yes. I wish I could have them every day." Victor leaned in, his voice coaxing. "If your mom asks, just tell her Daddy was called in for overtime at the factory last night. As long as you say that, all the peach pastries will be yours. How about it?" Chapter 3. Eric's eyes lit up, and without hesitation, he nodded enthusiastically. Victor, pleased, ruffled his hair and said, "Good boy." Then, he turned back to his room to change. I leaned against the cold wall, my body numb as if I had fallen into an ice cellar. When I was pregnant with Eric, I suffered immensely. For 3 long months, I battled relentless nausea. Even a sip of water would make me vomit. My throat burned from retching so much. As my belly grew, I became more and more clumsy. One day, while cooking, I accidentally scalded my leg. It was so painful that I could barely walk. At that time, Diana had just given birth. Victor rushed to her house constantly, afraid that she and her newborn weren't eating or sleeping well. Meanwhile, I fell at home, went into premature labor, and nearly lost my life. Where was Victor? In the hospital, taking care of Diana. I had no choice but to drag my weak body through the daily grind. Cooking, feeding the baby, changing diapers, soothing endless cries. I believed I was a good mother. I worked hard to earn money, snacks, toys, new clothes. If it was within my ability, Eric could have anything he wanted. Yet, I never realized the seed of betrayal had already been planted. In my past life, after my daughter lost her hearing, I confronted Victor. "Why didn't you take her to the hospital in time?" Victor avoided my gaze, his words mumbling and hesitant. Then, Eric, my son, my own flesh and blood, told me himself that Victor had been called for an emergency night shift at the factory. That was why he hadn't taken our daughter to the hospital. And I, so foolish, so naive, believed him, believed that children don't lie, believed that it was my fault for working overtime, for choosing money over my family. 4 years. Eric watched me drown in guilt. 4 years. He watched Victor and me argue over Diana and her daughter. Victor called me cruel, saying I had a dirty heart, that I was so heartless and petty. I couldn't even tolerate a struggling mother and her child. I hated Diana and her daughter. I hated Diana for stealing the love and care that should have been mine. I hated Roma for taking away the fatherly love that should have belonged to my daughter. And Eric knew it. He knew everything. Yet, as an adult, he still fell in love with Roma, brought her to me and said, "Mom, I'm going to marry her." I strongly opposed it, but Eric, stubborn as iron, threatened me. If you don't approve, I'll sever ties with you. I'll move into Roma's family instead. And then, he looked me in the eyes and said, you never understood love. No wonder Dad preferred Aunt Diana over you. The rage and heartbreak suffocated me. I couldn't breathe. My own son had killed me with his words. But now, I had died once before. What was there left to fear? Victor finished getting dressed and stepped out, holding Eric's hand. To his surprise, he ran straight into me at the doorway. Gloria, you're home from work? Victor's body stiffened, uncertain of how much I had overheard. I curled my lips into a smile. Then, without warning, I slapped him across the face. Hard. Again. And again. Victor was stunned, his eyes wide with shock, confusion, and humiliation. A self-proclaimed intellectual, he prided himself on never using vulgar language. Now, holding his swollen cheek, his dignity lay in tatters. Gloria, what gives you the right to hit me? You're nothing but a shrew. I shook out my hand, satisfied with the angry red marks on his face. I'm hitting you, you shameless mutt, because you don't know where your loyalties lie. Your own daughter was left alone at home, yet you ran off to help someone else find theirs. If I hadn't come home in the middle of the night, our daughter would have either burned her brain into stupidity or been left with a lifelong disability. Can you take responsibility for that? Victor gritted his teeth. It was just a mild fever. You're exaggerating. Besides, Eric was at home. Shouldn't a mother set a good example for her children? Even without reason, Victor insisted on defending himself. I let out a cold laugh. A good example? You stuffed your brain with books. And this is the example you set? Teaching our son how to lie? You bribed Eric with peach pastries. Had him lie to me about you working overtime at the factory, when in reality, you spent the whole night helping Diana search for her daughter. Now, you're buying her breakfast, handing her money. Why not just give her the entire family savings while you're at it? Victor ran a frustrated hand through his hair. This is why I wanted to keep it from you. Now that you know, you just won't let it go. Why can't you believe me? Diana and I are innocent. I'm only helping her because we were classmates. What's so wrong about that? She and her daughter are struggling. What's the harm in lending a hand? Struggling? Was that my fault? Why should I pity her? Why should I sacrifice myself for her? Chapter 4. In the hospital corridor, I watched Diana's profile, still unable to find an answer to my question. Her long, jet black hair was braided neatly over her shoulder, smooth and glossy. Her skin was pale and delicate, unblemished even in this harsh winter air. A faint fragrance of snow cream lingered around her. And then, there was me. For the sake of convenience, I had cut my hair short, just above my ears. My hands, hardened with calluses from years of labor, were rough and worn. There was no comparison. Diana's voice was soft and gentle. Gloria, Roma ran away from home yesterday. I was worried sick, so I asked Victor to help me look for her. If you're upset, take it out on me, hit me, scold me, but don't blame Victor. He's a man. Having to go to work with handprints on his face must be humiliating. I let out a cold laugh. Victor didn't complain. What makes you think you can speak on his behalf? A single tear slid down Diana's cheek. Her expression twisted in sorrow. You know my situation, Gloria. I have no job, no income. I can barely support myself and my daughter on my ration. If Victor didn't help me from time to time, I wouldn't be able to survive. I stared at her indifferently, unable to summon even an ounce of sympathy. Back then, so many people advised you to abort the child and find someone else to marry, but you insisted on keeping her, all for a so-called love that wasn't even worth a handful of grain. And now, you want to complain about how hard life is? Who else is to blame but yourself? When Diana came back pregnant, her family, friends, even the neighborhood women's committee all tried to persuade her. She wavered, nearly went through with the abortion, and even lay on the operating table. But at the last moment, she ran away. She swore to give birth to that child, believing it was a symbol of her love with her husband. Now, years later, the hardships of life had swallowed her whole, but the regret, that was something only she could bear. Thinking about the past, Diana buried her face in her hands and sobbed. She's my daughter, Gloria. When I went to the hospital, I could already feel her moving inside me. How could I possibly bring myself to get rid of her? Gloria, you're a mother too, you must understand. My heart remained unmoved as I stared at her trembling figure. Diana! Victor shouted angrily, forcefully pulling me away and shielding Diana behind him. Gloria! I was the one who wanted to help Diana. Stop making things difficult for her. My shoulder slammed against the wall, sending a sharp jolt of pain through my body. I sucked in a breath, then turned to Diana. Did I make things difficult for you? Diana looked uneasy, hesitating as if struggling to find the right words. Victor, you're misunderstanding Gloria. We were just talking. Victor didn't believe her. Talking? Then why were you crying? Gloria must have said something awful. His righteous indignation was so overwhelming. It was as if he was ready to sentence me on the spot. On our wedding day, Victor humiliated me in front of all our guests. The next day, I asked around and found my way to Diana's house, curious to see what kind of woman she was. Yet, just as I left, she conveniently fell ill and was rushed to the hospital. That night, Victor came home and exploded in rage. He accused me of being cruel, claiming that I couldn't even spare a pregnant woman. I tried to defend myself. I hadn't said anything harsh to Diana. I had simply asked about her past with Victor, but Victor was convinced I resented her. He warned me never to bother her again. 8 years ago, he didn't believe me, and now, he still doesn't believe me, because it never mattered. He would always find a way to blame me. Without warning, I slapped Victor twice. Then, I spread my hands innocently. There, I'm not making things difficult for Diana anymore. I'm hitting you instead. If you're so worried about her, why don't you just tie her to your waist and keep an eye on her all the time? Victor's face darkened with rage, humiliated in front of his beloved Diana. He raised his hand to strike me. I stepped forward, unflinching, tilting my face toward him. Go ahead, hit me, right here. But the moment you do, I'll march straight to the factory and report you for domestic violence. Let's see how that affects your promotions and salary raises. Victor's hand froze midair. His face flushed red, veins bulging with suppressed fury. Finally, he gritted his teeth and lowered his hand. I let out a mocking laugh and walked away without looking back. For 3 days, my daughter stayed in the hospital, receiving 4 treatment. Her fever broke, and she fully recovered without any lasting effects. Watching her bounce around cheerfully again, I felt a wave of relief and gratitude. A nurse approached with a payment slip. You need to settle the bill. I reached for my wallet, but the cash I had wasn't enough. So, I took my daughter home first, then returned to grab more money from the house. I searched everywhere, and only found a few cents, left with no choice. I grabbed our savings book and headed for the bank. But when I opened the passbook, my vision went dark. Victor came home from work, humming a tune. I grabbed the passbook and hurled it straight at his face. We've been married for 8 years. We're both working full-time. Why the hell is there barely any money in our savings? Where did all the money go? Chapter 5. Victor clutched the passbook tightly, guilt written all over his face. Diana doesn't have an income, and Roma is still growing. I just lent her the money. Don't worry, Diana promised me she'd pay it back. A mocking smile curled at the corners of my lips. Oh, Diana promised? Has she ever paid back even a single cent over the years? You said it yourself, she has no job, no income. How exactly is she going to repay you? Burn the money and send it to you in the afterlife? When I got pregnant with our first child, Victor suggested that we use my salary for household expenses, while his salary would be saved for emergencies. After doing some quick calculations, I agreed. After all, we were a family. No matter who saved the money, it would still be spent on our household in the end. At first, Victor deposited his entire paycheck into the bank every month. He would even show me the passbook. I laughed at him. We're husband and wife. I trust you. As long as the money's in the bank, there's no need to show me the passbook every time. Victor scratched his head sheepishly. Seeing is believing. This way, you'll feel reassured. I believed in Victor's sincerity, and from then on, I stopped checking. If it weren't for the hospital bill, I never would have known that Victor had almost emptied our savings. I had been using my salary to support our family of 4, while Victor saved his own money to support Diana and her daughter. Most people avoid talking about death, but Victor turned red with fury at my blunt remark. What do you gain from me dying? And can you stop talking about money? Money all the time? You're so obsessed with it. I let out a dry laugh, then mocked him right back. Oh, you're so noble, aren't you? You work so hard at the factory, aiming for promotions, not because you want a higher salary, not because you want to go home during the holidays and bask in the praise of your relatives. No, of course not. It's all purely for the good of the country. And Diana? She's just as noble as you, pretending to be selfless while taking your money. But don't worry. She's not leeching off you. She's just helping you uphold your virtuous, generous image. Tell me, Victor, everything you eat, everything you wear, everything you use, who pays for it? Oh, that's right, me. But when it comes to spending money, suddenly you're not touching your own salary. So tell me, who's really the one obsessed with money? Face it, you're nothing but a freeloading pretty boy. Victor wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. I tilted my head back, taking a sip of warm water to moisten my dry lips. For a moment, the room fell into an awkward silence. Victor pulled our son closer, trying to change the subject. Gloria, the kid is hungry. Let's eat first. All right? Bang! I slammed the enamel mug back onto the table. You gave Diana all that money, go ask her to feed you. And let me make this clear, starting this month, your entire paycheck and benefits go straight to me. If you still want to support Diana and her daughter, you'll have to scrape it from your own food rations. If you starve, that's your own damn problem, Victor muttered under his breath. Not even a single penny for myself? How am I supposed to pitch in when my coworkers go out to eat? I glared at him. If you have work dinners, tell me in advance. I want details, where, when, who's attending, and what dishes you'll be ordering. And don't even think about lying to me. I'll go ask around at the factory and the state-owned restaurants myself. Victor, knowing he was in the wrong, reluctantly agreed. After that huge fight, Victor finally behaved himself. He came home on time every day, helped our son practice writing, and read our daughter stories about war heroes. In this second chance at life, I no longer cared about who he loved or who he favored. As long as he handed over his salary and paid some attention to our daughter, life could still go on. Divorce was a serious matter for women, even in the 1980s when I lived in my past life. No matter how useless Victor was, having an adult man in the house was still a deterrent against opportunists. At the very least, he could block a lot of trouble for me. In the blink of an eye, it was little New Year's Eve. After work, I carried a slab of pork belly into the kitchen. Even though times were tough, we still deserved a good meal for the occasion. The coal stove burned hot. The sauerkraut and pork belly simmered happily in the pot, their fragrance filling the entire neighborhood. The 2 kids hovered by the kitchen door, their eyes full of anticipation. Bang! 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 Eric ran to open the door. Daddy, Aunt Diana is here. Chapter 6. Diana opened the lunchbox, revealing steaming hot buns. It's little New Year's Eve today, so I made some tofu and cabbage buns. I hope you don't mind. Victor's face was full of disapproval. You barely have enough food rations for yourself. Why waste them on making buns? But since you're here, Gloria made sauerkraut stew with pork belly. Stay and eat with us. Let's celebrate together. He then turned toward the kitchen and shouted, Gloria! Diana and Roma are here. Make a few extra pancakes and stir-fry some eggs with chives. Diana shook her head, refusing at first, but couldn't resist Victor's enthusiasm. Roma also tugged at her hand, pouting, Mom, stay and eat with us. Auntie's cooking is better than yours. Seeing her daughter's eager expression, Diana nodded and agreed. When I came out of the kitchen, I saw Eric and Roma each gnawing on a chicken drumstick, eating happily. But my daughter? She had nothing but a dry, bony chicken wing in her hands. Rage immediately surged through me. That half-roasted chicken had been bought with my money, and yet my own daughter couldn't even get a drumstick? I glared at Victor, my face dark as thunder. Why didn't you give the drumstick to our daughter? Victor responded matter-of-factly. She's only 4. She doesn't even have all her teeth yet. How could she chew a drumstick? Besides, Roma is a guest. Good food should go to the guests first. Roma, her eyes flashing mischievously, quickly finished her drumstick in a few big bites, then looked at me triumphantly. Seeing me still standing still, Victor urged me on. It's just a drumstick. Why are you being so petty? Hurry up and bring out the food. Sauerkraut stew with pork belly tastes best when it's hot. I scoffed coldly in my heart. Clearly, I had been too nice to Victor these past few days. He had already forgotten what pain felt like. Without another word, I grabbed the enamel mug and splashed its entire contents onto Victor's face. I've been slaving away in the kitchen all night, and I don't even get a single word of thanks. Fine, but now you're treating me like a servant. Cooking for you isn't enough. Now I have to serve your precious old flame too? Victor, if you want to bleed yourself dry for Diana, be my guest. But don't you dare drag me into it. Victor's face twisted with rage, and he immediately lashed out at me. It's just a drumstick. Why do you always have to make a big deal out of everything? You just ruined the whole little new year. Diana, acting heartbroken, sighed softly. It seems Gloria doesn't welcome Roma and me. I'd better take her home. Victor, can you grab a bowl so I can empty the buns I brought? I scoffed. A few plain vegetable buns. Huh? You didn't bring them earlier or later, just conveniently at dinner time. Let me guess. You knew Victor, this fool, would insist you stay for a meal? Swapping a few worthless buns for a full meal with meat and soup. Diana, you really know how to play your cards right. Diana looked utterly wronged, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted to bring Roma to thank Victor for all his help. I never expected you to think of me this way. Gloria, fine. I'll leave immediately. I won't come back to bother you again. She put on an expression of deep humiliation, angrily taking Roma's hand and storming out. And, of course, she took her buns with her. After all that drama, I completely lost my appetite for dinner, so I took my daughter out to a state-run restaurant instead. The head chef was excellent, and despite everything, this little new year still felt fulfilling. As the new year approached, all the factory workers were looking forward to their wages and bonuses so they could celebrate properly. I was in my room, counting money when Victor stormed in, his face dark. Gloria, what gives you the right to collect my paycheck? Without even looking up, I continued sorting the money into separate piles. We're a family of 4. Do you really think we can survive off my salary alone? Besides, you're so generous with your money. If I let you hold on to it, it'd never make it to our children. At least if I manage it, they'll get to eat more than just scraps. Even your factory director agrees with me. Starting now, I'll be the one collecting your wages. It wasn't even that difficult. I just shed a few tears in front of the director, telling him how Victor was a complete miser who hoarded his paycheck while forcing me to shoulder all the household expenses. The factory director was furious, even slamming his desk, saying he'd call Victor to his office and scold him. I had to stop him, saying I wanted to save Victor some face. Victor was fuming. It's my paycheck. You have no right to take it. I neatly folded each stack of money, wrapped it in a small floral cloth, and looked at him coldly. For the past 8 years, it was my salary that bought all the food for this house. What gave you the right to eat? I used my money to buy fabric and personally sew your clothes. What gave you the right to wear them? Victor gritted his teeth. We're husband and wife. We don't need to calculate things this way. I smiled calmly. Exactly. We're husband and wife. So what's wrong with me collecting your salary? Don't worry, it's safe with me. Unlike you, I don't have an old flame to financially support. Victor was left speechless, his face turning red with frustration. He stormed out to the courtyard and lit a cigarette. Chapter 7. With no money in his hands, Victor had to temporarily stop his financial aid to Diana and her daughter and find other ways to help. For instance, he started saving half of his lunch from the factory cafeteria and bringing it to Diana. The state-run mechanical factory provided substantial meals since the workers were doing physical labor. Braised pork, stir-fried greens, tofu stew, there was plenty of good food. But because Victor gave half away, he wasn't full at lunch and came home ravenous. Since I cooked according to normal portions, it was never enough for him. Why did you only steam a few buns? I'm still hungry. I continued tidying up the dishes, feigning confusion. I've noticed you've been eating a lot more at night lately, but you're not a teenage boy going through a growth spurt, are you? Since Victor was so willing to starve for love, then he could stay hungry. I thought going hungry for Diana was the worst he could do, but he still managed to surprise me. After a long day at the textile factory, I dragged my exhausted body out, eager to get home and cook for the kids. At the entrance of our home, I ran into a group of women in their 30s and 40s. They seemed to have been waiting for me. Sister, are you Victor's wife? I immediately felt on guard, my hand pausing over my keys. I am. Do you need something? The woman in the blue cotton jacket looked hesitant. It's nothing too serious. Really, we just wanted to ask, when is your husband planning to pay back the money he borrowed? We didn't want to come knocking, but our families rely on our husband's wages to feed 5 or 6 mouths. We have to budget carefully. Lending out dozens of yuan puts us in a difficult position. The other women started chiming in one after another. My daughter is about to be sent to the countryside. It's an unfamiliar place, and we need to prepare supplies for her, blankets, clothes, enamel basins. Even a single sewing needle costs money. My son's getting married soon. We're saving up to buy furniture for his new home. My father-in-law broke his leg while working in the fields. He's in the hospital waiting for surgery. Every word struck my heart, pressing down on me so hard that I could barely breathe. The woman in the blue jacket pulled out a piece of paper and unfolded it. It was an IOU. Victor's name and red fingerprint were clearly marked on it. The other women followed suit, showing me their own IOUs. Little sister, this is the debt note Victor gave my husband. We didn't forge it. I examined them one by one. After quickly calculating, I realized that he had borrowed a total of 300 yuan. Victor was neither sick nor injured. Why would he borrow so much money? I clenched my fists, struggling to suppress my rage and the urge to beat him senseless. Sisters, please go home for now. Give us some time to gather the money. We won't default on the debt. Then hurry up. We all need the money urgently. After I reassured them repeatedly, they finally left. At 9 p.m., Victor dragged his exhausted body home. The mechanical factory had sold a machine to the neighboring county, but it malfunctioned, so the factory sent Victor to repair it. He had left at dawn and was just now getting back. Standing at the door, he patted the snow off his coat. Gloria, make me a bowl of noodles. This damned weather is freezing. I flung open the curtain and demanded, why did you borrow so much money from your coworkers? Victor stiffened for a moment before raising his head to feign ignorance. Borrow money? What money? I go straight from the factory to home every day. Where would I even spend it? The anger I had been holding back exploded instantly. How long do you plan to keep playing dumb? They came to our house with the IOUs in their hands. You borrowed 300 yuan, not 30. What did you need so much money for? Are you feasting on dragon liver and phoenix marrow? Or are you supporting a third woman outside? Victor's face twisted in grievance, as if he had been wronged. I didn't. Roma is getting older, running around outside all day. That's not good for her. I borrowed money to pull some strings and get her into school. Diana promised she would pay it back. My body swayed, nearly collapsing. After steadying myself, I lunged at Victor, using both hands and feet to beat him. With what money? You've been giving her your salary for years. Have you ever seen a single penny back? And now you've racked up a massive 300 yuan debt. They're demanding repayment. Tell me, how do you plan to pay them back? You love playing the hero in front of Diana, but you never spare a thought for me and our 2 kids. You don't even worry about whether we'll have food to eat or how we'll deal with the debt. You just assume that since I gave birth to your children, I won't be able to leave you, and I'll have no choice but to clean up your mess. I let out a cold laugh and spat out the final words. Well, let me tell you, I want a divorce. Our daughter stays with me, and you take our son. Your salary can go to Diana however you want. And when you run out of money, go sell your blood to keep her happy. Chapter 8. After being reborn, I had made a firm decision to continue living with Victor, but he still silently racked up a debt of 300 yuan. Roma had just started primary school. The further she studied, the more money it would cost. And what about her future job and marriage? Was everything supposed to rely on Victor? This fool who throws away money. I couldn't allow Victor to remain in my life, planting a ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment. The next day, I packed my things and moved into the textile factory's dormitory with my daughter. The textile factory was also a major workplace, complete with a kindergarten, a primary school, a middle school, and even a hospital. After enrolling my daughter in kindergarten, I felt completely at ease. After work, as I walked toward the factory gate, I saw Victor standing beneath a tree in the distance. Several cigarette butts were scattered at his feet. Vanessa teased me. "Oh, look at that. Your husband came to pick you up." I sighed with a helpless smile. "I'm divorcing him soon. We'll be strangers." "Divorcing?" Vanessa gasped, covering her mouth, then nodded in understanding. "No wonder you moved into the dormitory." Victor stepped forward, and Vanessa, being considerate, walked away. "Gloria, I was wrong. Come home with me. Eric and I can't live without you." I scoffed. "You know you were wrong, so what? Will you change? If Diana comes to you for help again, will you be able to turn her away?" Victor's lips moved slightly, but the same old excuse spilled from his mouth. "Diana is raising a child alone. It's not easy for her." I let out a sharp laugh. "You don't regret anything, you just don't want to lose your free housemaid." These past few days, without me at home, you and Eric must have struggled. Huh? In this era, most men rarely did housework. Victor liked to call it earning money for the family, meaning that once he got home from work, he deserved to lie down and enjoy life. Meanwhile, women who worked weren't just expected to have jobs, they also had to cook, clean, and handle every household chore. And for those who didn't work, they served their husbands and in-laws, took care of their children, and once their kids grew up, they continued raising their grandchildren. After a lifetime of unpaid labor, they were left with aching joints and illnesses, only to be accused of eating for free. After marrying Victor, I handled everything at home and outside. He had never once touched the stove or washed his own underwear. Now, without me, he couldn't even find a matching pair of socks. Victor shifted his gaze guiltily, hoping I would soften. "Gloria, we've been married for 8 years. Even a single day as a married couple creates a bond of 100 days. And what exactly have you done for me?" I rolled my eyes. There's an old saying, marry a man, and he will provide food and clothing. But for 8 years, I was the one feeding and clothing this family with my wages. I've never enjoyed a single day of comfort thanks to you. We have 2 children. Can you really bear to let them be mocked by others for not having a proper family? Victor was still unwilling to give up. I laughed coldly. "You have the audacity to bring up our children? When I was pregnant with Eric and burned my leg, where were you? You were taking care of Diana during her postpartum recovery. I couldn't even get a warm meal when I nearly died giving birth to our child. Where were you? The moment Diana got sick, you rushed over to take care of her, and when I entrusted our feverish daughter to you for just one night, you ran off to find Roma, almost leaving our daughter permanently disabled. You think you can use the kids to chain me down? The last person who has any right to bring up our children is you." Victor was scolded so badly that he left in humiliation. The next day, he brought Eric and waited for me outside the textile factory. "Mom," Eric ran over, looking up at me with his bright, dark eyes. "Mom, bring my sister home. Dad and I miss you both." I bent down to look him in the eye. "I'm divorcing your father, and I won't go back to that house. Do you want to stay with me or with your dad?" Eric looked at me, then at Victor, then, with a few quick steps, he ran straight back to his father, stuck out his tongue, and made a silly face at me. "I don't want to stay with you. Dad tells stories, Mom doesn't." A slight pang hit my heart, but the last bit of guilt I felt toward Eric vanished completely. I straightened up and looked at Victor. "Eric stays with you. My daughter stays with me. 1 child each. That way, we don't owe each other child support. We've been married for 8 years, and I was the one supporting this family with my wages for 7 of them. It's time you and Eric repaid your share. My monthly wage is 37 yuan. You and Eric used up half of it. That's 1,575 yuan over 7 years. I'll round it off. Just give me 1,600 yuan. Victor's face turned deathly pale, his lips trembling. Do you really have to be this calculating? 1,600 yuan, that's like asking for my life. So, in the end, it was all about money. Spending money on Diana was easy for him. But when it came to giving money to me, it was like cutting off his own flesh. Your life isn't worth money. So why would I want it? My advice? Be smart and agree to this divorce. Sign an IOU and start repaying me. Otherwise, I'll make sure the entire factory knows about your righteous generosity. Chapter 9. That day, Victor left with his head hanging low. For several days, he didn't show up in front of me. I was more than happy to have some peace. One afternoon during lunch, the factory's gatekeeper came looking for me. Your husband is waiting for you at the entrance. He looks like he has something urgent to tell you. I didn't want to go. Vanessa sighed and nudged me. Go check it out. What if it's really something serious? After a moment of hesitation, I stood up and walked out. The moment Victor saw me, his eyes lit up, but his face remained anxious. Eric is sick and has a fever. He refuses to take his medicine unless you're the one to comfort him. I immediately rushed home, but as soon as I pushed the door open, Eric quickly buried himself under the blanket, letting out a soft whimper. Mommy. I want mommy. I reached out and placed my hand on his forehead. Completely normal. Turning around, I shot a cold glare at Victor. Why did you lie to me? Victor let out a bitter smile. Gloria. You're too heartless. You just left. You just decided on divorce without hesitation. If I didn't lie, you wouldn't have come back. I immediately turned to leave. Without even a trace of reluctance. We have nothing to talk about except divorce. If you refuse to sign, I'll go straight to the factory director to seek justice. That evening, after work, I went to pick up my daughter from the kindergarten. However, the teacher informed me that she had already been picked up. Who took her? A man. He said he was Luna's father, and Luna recognized him. Panic rushed through me. I immediately ran to Victor's house. The moment I burst inside, I searched every single corner, but my daughter was nowhere to be found. Heart pounding, I turned to Victor and demanded answers. Where's Luna? Where did you hide her? Victor smiled innocently. I sent her to my mother's place. Don't worry. She'll take good care of Luna. As long as you move back home and live with me like before, I'll bring her back immediately. Victor's mother favored boys over girls. Even though I had already given birth to both a son and a daughter, she still wasn't satisfied. She kept urging me to have more sons, claiming that only with enough sons could a woman avoid being bullied in old age. Compared to me, my sister-in-law had given birth to 4 big, healthy boys. My mother-in-law was overjoyed, grinning from ear to ear. Every chance she got, she would sigh dramatically in front of me. Women should stay at home and serve their husbands and children. The moment they get a job, their hearts start to wander. Poor Eric doesn't even have a younger brother to support him. He'll never be able to stand tall. And it's all because of his heartless mother. The unease and anxiety I had felt earlier instantly transformed into overwhelming fury. Victor must have lost his mind to think he could use such a disgusting trick to make me stay. Fine. You play dirty, and I'll play even dirtier. If you want a fight, you'll get one. I pretended to hesitate for a long while, putting on an act of reluctant compromise. Tell your mother to take good care of Luna. I'll go home tonight and think about it. I'll give you my answer tomorrow. Victor beamed, looking as if he could already see the bright future of me moving back in. That night, I returned to my dorm at the textile factory and went straight to bed. Think about it? As if even wasting a single second on Victor was too generous. He was ruthless, so I would be ruthless too. The next morning, I went straight to the director of the machinery factory. Tears streamed down my face as I stood in the hallway, wailing, "Director, you have to stand up for me. Victor and I have been married for 8 years, and he has never brought home a single cent. Our entire family's food and clothing have all depended on my salary." Some curious bystanders chimed in. Then where has Victor's salary gone? I clutched my chest, pretending to be overwhelmed with pain and injustice. All his money went to a widow and her child. He claims it's to help an old classmate. But the truth is, Victor has never let go of his feelings for that woman. When I took over collecting his salary through the factory, he had no money left to give them. so he borrowed 300 yuan from his coworkers just to send that woman's child to school. If the wives of those men hadn't come knocking to demand repayment, I would have never known he had racked up so much debt. On our wedding day, he abandoned me to run after that woman. After marriage, he kept their relationship shady and unclear, giving her all his money while leaving me to struggle. And now he's in debt because of her. I can't live like this anymore. Director, please, do me a favor and let me divorce him. I'm more than willing to set him free for his beloved. The crowd immediately burst into discussion. Never expected Victor to be such a hopeless romantic. Romantic? He's just a fool. Ha! Being a fool these days is no joke. No matter how well you raise another man's child, they'll never be yours in the end. Some women in the crowd sympathized with me. This poor woman has suffered too much. Who can tolerate their husband still thinking about another woman? It's one thing to not love her, but at least bring money home. This woman lost both love and financial security. What a terrible deal. Honestly, the smartest one here is that woman outside. She gets Victor's money to raise her child without ever having to cook, clean, or care for in-laws. She's living the easy life. Chapter 10. When Victor finally rushed over, his glorious deeds had already spread like wildfire. Colleagues and workers whispered among themselves, their words making his scalp tingle with embarrassment. He grabbed my wrist and tried to pull me outside. Gloria, let's talk at home. Don't disrupt everyone's work. I shook off his hand. I wanted to talk things out with you, but you refused to cooperate. You took our daughter to threaten me, so I had no choice but to ask the factory director for justice. You brought this upon yourself. The women's affairs officer looked at Victor sternly. Victor, is what Gloria said true? As a husband, you neglect your household while constantly supporting an unrelated woman. You're being very inappropriate in your relationships with women. Victor lowered his head and tried to defend himself. It's not as bad as you say. We're just former classmates. The women's officer's voice grew heavier as she scanned the group of men watching the scene. Ask these male comrades, would any of them go to such lengths just to help a female classmate? The male workers shook their heads and waved their hands in unison. Neglecting your own wife and kids for an old classmate? You'd have to be kicked in the head by a donkey to do something that stupid. I wouldn't dare support a female classmate. People would report me for inappropriate relations between men and women. Making money is hard enough. It's difficult just feeding our own families. Who has the spare resources to help someone else? The saying goes, help in an emergency, not in poverty. I don't want to get involved in a bottomless pit. Victor wished he could bury his head in his chest, or better yet, find a hole to crawl into. The onlookers were buzzing, throwing in their own comments one after another. To save Victor some face and protect the reputation of the machinery factory, the factory leaders decided to handle the matter privately. Inside the office, the women's officer questioned him again. Comrade Victor, are Gloria's accusations true? The women's officer had participated in the Revolutionary War, and her presence carried a natural authority that made it hard to look her in the eye. Victor closed his eyes for a moment before speaking with an oily tongue. I swear, I was only helping a classmate. I have never actually done anything that would betray Gloria. I clenched my fists. But your actions have already hurt me. I don't want to live with you anymore. Gloria, don't get agitated. The women's officer's calm and gentle gaze settled on me, warm like a mother's touch. We will investigate the matter thoroughly and give you a fair resolution. I pressed further. What if I just want a divorce? The women's officer smiled. Of course, you can. This is a new era, a new society. Love is free. Marriage is free. We don't practice that outdated feudal nonsense where women must obey their husbands in marriage. This women's officer was known for her strict work ethic and integrity. She was highly respected in the machinery factory. I trusted her. Satisfied, I left and gathered a few close colleagues to help me bring my daughter back. A week later, the factory made its decision. Victor was found to be disloyal to his marriage and family, engaging in improper relationships. He was stripped of his position as a team leader in the technical department and transferred to a struggling machinery factory in a neighboring county for 2 years. His future return would depend on his performance. In reality, this so-called return was nothing more than a carrot dangled in front of a donkey, a false hope. At the same time, our divorce was officially approved. The day we finalized the divorce, The sun was shining brightly. Victor's voice was hoarse as he spoke. Gloria, we've been married for 8 years. I only made a small mistake. How did we end up divorcing over this? The golden sunlight made me squint. I gave you many chances, but you never cherished them. You assumed I would never leave you, that I would be trapped with you for life. I turned around and walked away without hesitation. Diana, holding Roma's hand, approached Victor. Victor, I know how you feel about me. Now that you're divorced, we can finally. Victor curled his lips into a mocking smile. I'm about to be transferred to Yun County. The conditions there are far worse than here. Can you handle that kind of life? Diana nodded eagerly, her eyes full of determination. As long as I'm with you, I can endure anything. Victor scoffed at himself. You've gotten used to living off others. Of course. You think life is easy. Before the first light of dawn, Victor quietly boarded a cargo truck heading to Yun County. When Diana woke up and realized she had lost her long-term provider, she immediately chased after him. Back in the factory manager's office, I had never mentioned her name, but gossipers had their ways. The neighbors had always been suspicious of how Diana managed to support herself and her daughter without a job. Now, with all the talk surrounding her, they made no effort to hold back their ridicule and scorn. This place wasn't big, nor was it small, but a reputation could be ruined in a single breath. Diana chose to move to Yun County, determined to win back her meal ticket and start over. As the saying goes, when a woman pursues a man, it's as thin as a veil. Diana clung to Victor for 6 months, concerned about his reputation. He had no choice but to marry her. However, married life didn't turn out the way he had imagined. He was the sole breadwinner, responsible for supporting the entire family. Their 2 children were at the age where they were constantly getting into trouble, often returning home covered in dirt. On top of that, Diana had a growing pile of household chores. Over time, Diana lost the grace and composure she once had. She also lost the charm that had once made her so special. Before his wedding, Victor had written me a letter. He begged me to reconcile with him. I never replied. Instead, I watched the letter burn into ashes, drifting away like smoke. I focused on my work, my life, and raising my daughter. I made no effort to ask about Victor's new family, and that, I believe, was the best outcome.